My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 38 years old, and up until a few months ago, I was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. I spent 15 years in uniform, most of it leading tactical training units and overseeing operations that never made the news but held the seams of the mission together. I still remember the exact moment it ended, a Tuesday morning. Bright, sterile light in a conference room I'd walked into 100 times. The commanding officer slid a folder across the table like it was a menu. No build-up, no warning. Just a quiet sentence that felt like a bullet. "We're letting you go." At first, I thought I misheard. I blinked, waiting for someone to say it was a mistake. Nobody did. Around the table, the faces I'd trained, backed, and fought for stared down at their hands. No one spoke up, no one stood. They just watched it happen like it had all been decided weeks ago. I didn't ask questions. I didn't cause a scene. I stood, picked up my notebook, and walked out. My boots echoed down the hallway I used to run drills through. I didn't look back. The guard at the exit gave me a nod like he'd been briefed already. Outside, the sun hit hard. It should have felt freeing. But all I felt was cold, like I'd been erased. I walked the halls like a ghost in my own house. The corridor outside the briefing room was quiet, too quiet for that time of day. Normally, you'd hear the low hum of radios, the scuff of boots, clipped conversations about field reports or training rotations. That morning, it was silence. People saw me. I know they did. One junior officer glanced up, caught my eye, then quickly looked down like I'd caught him doing something wrong. A staff sergeant who used to grab coffee with me every Tuesday suddenly found something very important to read on the bulletin board. I wasn't invisible, but I might as well have been. My office door was still unlocked. My name still on the plate. I stepped in, grabbed my personal folder, the photo of my parents tucked behind the computer monitor, and the small Army issue clock I never really liked but always kept ticking. I looked around one last time. 15 years, boxed in under 5 minutes. On my way out, I passed the motor pool. One of the techs was working under a Humvee radio playing low. He didn't look up. I'd approved his last promotion. Outside the gate, the sun glared against the asphalt. A black government SUV pulled up. The driver, a young corporal, opened the door without saying a word. The ride was silent. No small talk. Just the hum of the engine and the occasional static burst from the radio. My phone buzzed twice. Messages from guys in the unit, checking on equipment inventories, as if I hadn't just been erased. I didn't reply. We reached my street just after noon. No crowds, no ceremony, not even a paper to sign. I stepped out and shut the door behind me. The SUV drove off without waiting. I stood there, in front of the house I barely saw in daylight these last few years, and for a second I didn't know what to do with my hands. Inside, the quiet felt heavier. I walked through the living room, past the untouched dining table, into the kitchen, dropped my folder on the counter. My phone lit up again. Another message, another request, another name who still hadn't heard the news. I let it buzz. 15 years of service. No scandal, no failure, no warning. Just cut loose like a loose thread. They said it was downsizing, strategic reassignment, budget reshuffle. Words that mean nothing when you're the one being erased. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just blank. I sat down in the darkened room, phone face down, coffee cold beside me. Outside, the world moved on like nothing happened. Inside, I felt like a man who'd been shut out of his own story, like I had never been there at all. I still woke up at 4:30. No alarm, just habit drilled deep into the bones. My eyes would snap open in the dark, heart racing like I was already late for something. But there was nothing to be late for anymore. I'd sit at the edge of the bed, feet planted on the cold floor, waiting for my brain to catch up with reality. The old morning rhythm played out like a broken loop. Brush teeth, make the bed tight, brew coffee the same way I did on base. But now, no briefing followed. No orders. No voice on the other end of a radio. The phone stayed silent. No alerts. No duty rosters or command updates. Just a black screen sitting useless on the kitchen counter. I started carrying it less. It wasn't a lifeline anymore, just a piece of metal that reminded me no one needed me. The house was too quiet. Every sound stood out, the hum of the fridge, the creak in the hallway floor. I found myself pacing from room to room, not looking for anything, just moving like a soldier on patrol. Only now there was no mission. Even breakfast felt off. I'd eat in silence, staring at the wall where a photo of my unit used to hang before I took it down. I didn't want to look at their faces, didn't want to remember who I was supposed to be. The strangest part was the stillness. After years of constant motion, the absence of pressure felt like something missing. No schedules, no demands, no emergencies, just space. But that space didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being set adrift. I kept asking myself the same question. Who am I without the uniform? Without the responsibility, the structure, the chain of command? I'd spent my whole adult life becoming someone who mattered inside the system. Now that I was outside, I wasn't sure if I mattered at all. It was late afternoon, sun low in the sky, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I was nursing a cup of black coffee, the same mug I used every morning on base. Then came the knock. Sharp. Urgent. Not the kind neighbors make. I opened the door to find Blake standing there. Sergeant Blake. He looked like hell. Hair a mess, face pale, uniform wrinkled like he'd slept in it. His eyes darted past me, like he wasn't sure if he should be here. Then he stepped inside without waiting for an invite. He dropped his pack on the floor and started pacing. Words tumbled out fast. The whole place is falling apart. Training schedules are a mess. The new CO scrapped your protocols, replaced them with some half-baked simulation program no one understands. Mission briefs are getting botched. 3 guys got pulled from active duty last week because of preventable mistakes. I stayed quiet, let him vaunt. Watched him unravel in my kitchen like he was still back in boot camp. He said more. Said they reassigned half the team without any overlap. Said soldiers are burning out, walking away mid-rotation. No one's tracking logistics. Supplies are late, morale is shot. Every sentence hit harder than the last. He finally stopped and looked at me, eyes wide, desperate, like I held some kind of answer. I didn't give him one, just poured him a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. He took it, hands shaking, but didn't drink. Inside, I felt something stir. Not anger, not pride, something deeper. The kind of quiet realization that creeps in slow. I hadn't been just a cog in the machine. I'd been the glue, the anchor, the firewall. Blake didn't say it, but I saw it in his face. He came because he didn't know who else could fix it. He still saw me as the guy who could hold a system together when it cracked. I hadn't moved in weeks, but for the first time, I wasn't just sitting still. I was calculating, watching the edges of a new map form in my head. It started with a voicemail, unfamiliar number, D.C. area code. I almost deleted it without listening, but something in me hesitated. I hit play. The voice was calm, clipped, professional. Said they were with the Department of Defense. Said my name had come up in a closed-door strategy meeting. Said they wanted to talk. I didn't call back right away. The next day, the call came again. This time, live. A woman introduced herself, rank withheld, and said she was speaking on behalf of the Pentagon. They were looking to overhaul the Army's tactical training program. They needed someone who'd built real systems. Someone who'd done more than check boxes. Someone like me. I leaned back in my chair, let the silence stretch. I told her I wasn't interested in coming back, not the way they meant it. I'd worn the uniform, done the grind, paid the price. If they wanted me now, it'd be on my terms. She paused, then asked what that meant. I told her flat out, no rank, no chain of command. I don't answer to brass. I don't wait for approvals. I work with authority, not under it. I design the structure. I don't report into it. There was another pause. Then she said she'd call back. 3 days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of my house. 2 men in suits stepped out. No insignia, no visible weapons, just tight jaws and quiet nods. They handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal offer. Civilian contractor, unrestricted clearance, full access, and the green light to build a team from scratch. At the bottom, the signature of a deputy secretary. I didn't smile, just nodded. Told them I'd need one more meeting, behind closed doors. That meeting took place in a room with no windows, one long table, 6 men and women in pressed uniforms and tailored suits. Not one had ever said my name before that day. Now, they listened like it was scripture. I laid out my vision, not just fixing what was broken, replacing it with something bulletproof. Modular, adaptive, real. One of them asked what made me think I could pull it off. I looked him straight in the eye. Because I already did. You just never noticed. The room went quiet. Then someone pushed a folder across the table. Final terms, I signed without ceremony. Didn't need to perform. They weren't doing me a favor. They were finally catching up. When I stood, they all did too. It wasn't protocol, it was instinct. Like they knew something had shifted. That the guy they erased was now the one writing the rules. As I walked out, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt ready. I returned to the base the following week. Not in uniform. In a dark gray suit, no insignia, just a badge clipped to my belt that unlocked every door. Officers glanced up, unsure whether to salute. I nodded once and kept walking. Past old offices, past men who used to outrank me. I wasn't there to play soldier anymore. I was there to rebuild the system that had thrown me away. And this time, I was the one holding the pen. I walked through the gates of Fort Ridge just after 0600. Same gravel crunch under my boots, same morning haze hanging over the drill yard. But this time, no one barked my name, no clipboard waited in my hands. I wasn't back as a soldier. I was back to fix what they'd broken. Some of the faces I passed did a double take. A few whispered. Others just stared like they couldn't believe it. One young sergeant, probably fresh out of training, snapped to attention without thinking. I gave him a nod and kept moving. Let them feel it, let them remember. The command building looked the same from the outside, but inside, it was chaos. Folders piled on desks, radios squawking over each other. Maps with overlapping pins, too many colored markers, no logic. A captain looked up from a table and blinked like he'd seen a ghost. Another officer dropped a tablet when he realized who just walked in. I didn't waste time. I walked straight to the whiteboard, grabbed a marker, and turned my back to the room. The noise started to fade. Slowly, like a switch had been flipped, I drew 3 boxes. Then 3 arrows, labeled each one with a single word: command, execution, feedback. That's where it broke, I said. Right there. No one gave orders clearly. No one followed them cleanly. No one checked what went wrong after. You lost the loop. Now you're running blind. No one interrupted. Not even the major in the corner who clearly thought he outranked me. He didn't. Not anymore. I kept going. Drew a second layer. Red circles, bottlenecks, unassigned tasks. Missed escalations. The kind of things I used to patch in my sleep. I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice. I just spoke facts. And facts hit harder than orders when you've been living inside the failure. I turned around and finally faced the room. Every eye was locked on me. Not because I was loud, because I was right. You want this place to run again, I said. You start by knowing why it stopped. That's what we're doing here. Not salvaging, rebuilding. In that moment, something shifted. Not just in the room, in the people. For the first time in months, maybe years, they saw a plan, a spine, a reason, and they saw the man who brought it. Not with medals, not with rank, with clarity. And that was louder than any title I'd ever worn. I shut down every training session before noon. No marching, no drills, no briefings, just silence across the compound. At first, no one understood why. Officers glanced at each other, unsure if it was a mistake. Recruits stood frozen, halfway through exercises. I didn't explain. Not yet. The system was cracked, not jammed. There were 3 major fractures I could see in a glance. First, mission assignments were routed wrong. No structure, just a rotation based on convenience. People were doing tasks 3 levels above or below their pay grade. Second, oversight between departments was non-existent. Intel didn't sync with logistics. Logistics didn't sync with field units. It was all guesswork. And third, no one was thinking long-term. No risk models, no contingency trees. If anything failed, there was no fallback. So I pulled the plug. We don't train inside a broken system. We rebuild the system first. That afternoon, I called in every department lead. Sat them down in the war room and told them exactly how their lanes were overlapping, breaking, and blindfolding each other. Some pushed back, said they didn't have authority to halt operations. I told them authority wasn't the problem, vision was. By sunset, the mood across the base had shifted. Recruits whispered about what was happening. Rumors flew. People thought I was dismantling the unit. In a way, I was. I had to break it to make space for something better. That night, I stayed in the command office. Just me, a whiteboard, and 3 dry erase markers. I drew every branch, every decision point, every cross-functional blind spot. Red lines marked breakdowns, blue for reroutes, green for opportunities. I didn't stop for dinner, barely touched my water. The overhead light buzzed faintly. I didn't notice. By midnight, the board looked like a battlefield of ideas. My shirt was rolled at the sleeves, hands smudged with ink, but I didn't care. The door opened once. A young corporal peeked in, saw me working, didn't say a word, just nodded and closed it again. Somewhere in those lines and arrows, I could see the shape of a new system, one that didn't need constant heroics to survive, one that respected the people inside it. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was solid, the first real structure in months. And for the first time since I'd returned, I felt like I wasn't patching holes. I was building a foundation, and they could all feel it too, even if they didn't know it yet. Change had arrived. Not loud, but steady, and it looked like me. The room was cold, polished, and full of stars on shoulders. They sat around the table like they were waiting for a presentation. I didn't give them one, I gave them terms. 3, to be exact. First, I wanted veto power over all training appointments. No more political placements. If someone was going to shape soldiers, they needed to earn it. Second, I wanted full control over my team. I would choose the people, build the roles, and answer to no one on composition. Third, I would take full operational command of the National Tactical Training Curriculum. My curriculum, not a committee rewrite, not a panel edit. The room shifted, some faces froze, others frowned. One general leaned back in his chair like I'd just insulted the flag. A colonel near the end of the table opened his mouth to push back. Then I slid the report forward. 72% failure rate in advanced readiness drills. Dropout rates up 18%. Cross-departmental misfires in 6 out of 10 field simulations. I didn't add commentary. I just let the data sit there, loud and plain. Silence followed. Someone cleared their throat. Another reached for the folder. I leaned forward, calm, measured. Told them this wasn't a threat, it was a trade. They needed results. I had a system. They could either let me run it or keep patching leaks while the boat sank. They didn't agree right away, but they didn't dismiss it either. That's how power moves work. You don't need applause. You just need silence in the right places. And I was hearing it now. By the time the session ended, I had what I needed. The signatures weren't on the paper yet, but the shift had happened. They didn't look at me like a disgraced officer anymore. They looked at me like a firewall they couldn't afford to ignore. As I stood, I picked up the folder that held the blueprint. Not just for training, for the next decade of military readiness. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt focused. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about doing it right. And this time, I wasn't following orders. I was writing them. 6 months later, Fort Ridge didn't look the same. Completion rates across all training phases had jumped by over 30%. Junior officers moved with clarity. Decisions were quicker, cleaner, field exercises ran smoother. You could feel it in the way recruits stood, taller, steadier, like they knew the system had their back. I didn't stay on base. I moved into a small cabin near the edge of a state forest. Woke up early, walked the same trails every morning, chopped wood when I needed clarity. I didn't take meetings unless I had to. The work was done. The system was holding. Every few weeks, someone would call, asking if I'd accept a medal, speak at a ceremony, take on a formal title. I always said no. I'd done my part. It wasn't about my name. It was about making sure the machine didn't need any single name to run. One afternoon, a young lieutenant found his way to my door. Said he'd trained under the new structure. Said he'd heard stories about me. Asked why I never let them pin anything on me. I looked at him and told him the truth. Because when a system's built right, it doesn't collapse if one man steps away. And that's the only kind of system worth building. He nodded, quietly, like he understood. Then he left. I watched the trees sway in the evening light, heard nothing but the wind and the faint buzz of a cicada somewhere nearby. No rank, no orders, just peace. And for the first time in years, it felt like enough.